Joining us now to discuss this, Dr. Terry Lyles. Terry, it is always good to have you here. What do you make of this new report from the FBI?
You know, I think it's interesting. It's probably long overdue, actually, because I think there's been a lot of people asking for these kind of stats for several years. But I think the alarming thing is that, you know, we shouldn't be as alarmed as we are, I think, at times, that we live in a culture of violence. You know, it's promoted all over the place. It's promoted in sport. It's promoted at the movies. It's promoted on TV. It's promoted all over the place in entertainment. So I find it kind of ironic that we go, I wonder why that's so shocking when we live in a culture that promotes violence.
And of course, the irony is that we always hear from Hollywood, gotta control guns, yet there was a clever little interplay that showed up in social media with all the actors saying we needed to curtail gun violence, snippets from motion pictures and television shows where these same actors were wielding weapons.
Sure.
What happens in Hollywood? Is that kind of a psychologically trying to wash your hands of something in which you may play a role?
Yeah, I think they try to walk a line. I mean, you know, you're going for the next part. You're trying to, you know, make money. That's your business. And, you know, I think the anesthetizing effect of you see so much violence in growing up. I mean, little kids today are watching violent shows. I mean, that's alarming to me. Young kids, even some of the cartoons are portrayed with a lot of violence. So it's just an outpour when you see someone that picks up a weapon and in someone's life. It could be a weapon, it could be a car, you know, it could be their hand in abuse, it could be a lot of things, but I think it really stems back to the violence that we see every day.
There is a new element that is reminiscent of the shows and very graphic in violence and involves interaction, and that's the variety of games on the internet and games that people are playing these days. Has the rise of the internet, the rise of social media, correspondingly the rise of these kind of realistic involved games, has that further lowered the barrier to have people thinking the heretofore unthinkable about picking up weapons and waging mass killings?
I think you could say that very easily. And I think you could go a step further and say that because of that proliferation of violence that's interactive, which takes it to the second screen experience. It's more than just watching it on a television screen. Now you actually become the shooter. And it's made it so easy for anyone to think they can pick up a gun and get resolution or look at it as entertainment. So it not only lowers the bar, it increases the awareness of violence and makes it okay.
And yet we have seen situations where there have been those with the intent to commit mass murder being stopped by legally authorized permit holders, concealed carry, or those with weapons who put a stop to it. Do a number of these folks who are inclined to engage in these mass killings, do they purposely aim at places where they believe there will be no guns?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure. We'd probably have to do some statistics on that and some research to really find that out. But I think it's interesting when, again, you mentioned there are people that have license to carry weapons. There's people who don't. But I think the stats would bear out there's more abuse by people that aren't licensed with guns that carries on, including our law enforcement that have a rough job. They get a bad rap a lot of times, but you know, they're facing danger and someone's sticking a gun in their face every day. It doesn't make the job easier, but I think as this continues and this research continues to go in the way that it's going, I think we're going to see it just increase that much more.
Well, we see the research in this report on the rise in incidents, and apart from that macro kind of cataloging, there needs to be some micro examination of hints we might be able to pick up on.
Yes.
Now, obviously, we go back in retrospect and you have a situation where, again, people are using that social media, the new social media, to perhaps announce their intentions. But since you're professionally trained and work as a psychologist, are there any warning signs that we as laymen could see in, God forbid, friends, family, or acquaintances, neighbors, that might indicate people would be inclined to take this type of horrible action?
Yeah, I think it's more personality driven, but the awareness in a family or with a friend is always key. It goes on the same line of a suicide as a homicide. I think we just need to be paying attention more, and I think, again, because of all the distractions that technology brings us today, all these second and third screen play games, and we're texting and emailing, more than not, people are walking around in their own world. And that's alarming to me. So I think we're walking past situations every day, even people close to us, we don't see they're depressed. We don't see that they could become dangerous at some level. We don't see that our little child is sitting in front of a TV too long playing these violent games. I think as adults especially, and as our culture has to wake up and go back to some old school awareness and just pretend that we care even if we don't care.
Well, yeah, and this is the paradox of this digital world, of this connected world. We get connected with strangers, quote, socially, and we move our focus away from our families. 30 years ago, long before this type of technology, I have a friend who made a conscious decision as then a young father to take the television out of his house. Now, they kept a TV set for a VCR to watch movies as a family together, but they took it out, and he said it wasn't so much for the threat to the kids, but for him becoming distracted as a self-professed news nut, watching what was going on in the world and ignoring what was happening at home.
Sure. Same thing that's going on with social media as we just mentioned. You know, what he was trying to do was limit that, and I think this is a huge opportunity for continual education. I train in the corporate world several days a week in corporate America, and part of my message is techno-stress and the effects it's having on our brains, the effects it's having in our psyche, the effects it's having on our society. And I think we just have to become more aware of the fact that we still need to interact with people just like you and I are right now versus just texting one another or doing this over Skype. It's great to sit down and actually have a conversation with someone because we've lost that personal touch and that interconnectivity as human beings.
So Terry, mindful of that, when you go in to advise companies, are companies setting up, and I know a lot of major corporations try to have town hall formats,
Sure.
but as I hear you describe this, I almost envision like an internet-free connection point. In other words, a room, a lunchroom or whatever, where we don't want a phone, we don't want a device, we just want you to be able to sit here and actually talk with your coworkers.
Actually, interesting enough, I've helped companies do that more rapidly over the past 10 years. We call them recovery rooms.
Recovery
rooms.
Wow.
Just like in a hospital.
Yeah.
The first place you go after surgery is in recovery. What do they do there? They're checking your vitals. They're making sure that you're coming back up to norm, whatever that is. And we have a need every day as human beings to have oscillatory recovery every 90 to 120 minutes, a quick break, 2 to 5 minutes to recharge, refocus, and recalibrate our system chemically as well as mentally. So these recovery rooms, break rooms, they have fruits and vegetables and water, sofas that you can sit down, you can actually have a conversation, and they have signs up that say, no cell phone computers, please. And I think it's kind of ironic that we have to do that as people, but we're so connected, it's really hard to disconnect, even for moments to take care of ourselves.
Which brings to mind the tradition that is disappearing in so many families of the family dinner hour. Kids home from school or home from athletics practice, mom and dad, everybody sits down to talk and visit and have food and fellowship. In the homes, is that the version of the works recovery room?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. And, you know, when I grew up, that's what we did. You know, we had dinner the same time every night, and you had to be there or it was trouble. So now with everybody running and texting and emailing and all the things that they're doing, I think if you can just capture time with your family and create time, whether it's dinner time, whether it's time sitting around outside at the pool or under a picnic table or somewhere in a restaurant, to create space and time for human contact. And we're moving so fast now because of technology, we are forgetting every day the very basic things that makes relationship work. Connection, contact, communication, and just simple love and respect for one another. And that's being lost when you walk down the street and people are not even looking up. They're looking down at their devices, running into things, falling into things, walking past the world. And so many times I have people in training where I say, I need you to stop during the day and become conditioned to the fact that you need to disconnect from your technology for minutes at a time. If you can't give it 30 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes. Go to the bathroom and leave the phone on your desk. You know, go walk away from your table and have lunch. And it's that interaction that we can have with people that we're losing. And it's really alarming to me, growing up the way that I grew up and now seeing the world as it is today, especially with young children and students that are struggling with it. I had a group of students with families the other night at a company, and a lot of these young people were speaking up and saying, you know, what I do for to get my recovery, I go to social media. So that's their world.
Well, that's something we will have to remember. Dr. Terry Lyles, we appreciate your thoughts on these latest statistics and this trend, changing the social media that may connect us with the world but disconnects us with family and coworkers. Thank you, Terry, for connecting with us.
Thank you.
Well, you just heard what the good doctor had to say. Do you agree or disagree? Do you still have a family dinner hour? And oh yeah, doesn't the Second Amendment still mean something in today's society? Why don't you tweet me your comments at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. There's also newsmaxtv.com/comment, and don't forget Facebook.